H.W. Bush and the end of the Cold War. Sunday night at 8 Eastern on C-SPAN's Q&A.
Monday, Maryland Governor Larry Hogan debated his Democratic challenger, Ben Jealous, in their only scheduled debate. Topics included the state's economy, education, and health care. This hour-long debate is courtesy of Maryland Public Television.
The 2018 Maryland Gubernatorial Debate, recorded at the studios of Maryland Public Television and broadcast without editing in its entirety.
Welcome, everyone, to the Maryland Gubernatorial Debate. I'm Jeff Salkin at Maryland Public Television. Joining us in the studio here are the two leading candidates for governor, the Republican nominee, incumbent Governor Larry Hogan, and the Democratic nominee, Ben Jealous. Today's debate is being produced live to tape, meaning you will see it in its entirety with no edits and no stoppages. We'll get first to the opening statements. Each candidate will have 90 seconds. First to speak is Mr. Jealous.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ben Jealous. I'm the former national president of the NAACP. I'm the dad to two Maryland public school kids and the son of two Maryland public school teachers whose marriage was against the law here 52 years ago because she's black and he's white. I'm running for governor because I have a vision that comes out of my experience building small businesses into big businesses across our state and across our country. A vision and a plan to make sure that we finally fully fund our schools, keep the broken promise on the casino money, make sure our teachers are respected and paid better. A plan to make sure that we finally get healthcare costs truly under control, build a system that's sustainable, and make sure that no one's driven to poverty just for using their healthcare. And a plan to get our economy going again and do what I do every day, build a more inclusive, robust, 21st century economy. Now, folks will tell you that the things that I want to do are hard. And they're right. Nothing worth doing is easy. I was named Person of the Year by the Baltimore Sun because in 1 year I led the successful effort to abolish the death penalty while co-chairing the successful effort to pass the DREAM Act while helping pass marriage equality. I pull people together to get big things done. That's why I've been endorsed by the teachers and the nurses and business people all across the state. I hope to earn your vote, too.
Mr. Hogan.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the sponsors of tonight's event, and I want to especially thank all of you for watching at home. 4 years ago, Maryland was way off track and heading in the wrong direction. We had lost 8,000 businesses and 100,000 jobs after 43 consecutive tax hikes that crushed our economy. I decided to step up and try to do something about that. I promised to put Maryland on a new path, and we have done exactly what we said we would do. We've cut taxes, tolls, and fees 4 years in a row by $1.2 billion. And we put all that money back into the pockets of hardworking Marylanders, retirees, and small businesses, and back into our growing economy. We now have more businesses open and more people working in our state than ever before in the history of the state. The economy is turning around, and we're investing more record funding in education, record funding in transportation, and in cleaning up and protecting the Chesapeake Bay. We've made tremendous progress, but there's still a lot more hard work to be done. That's why tonight I'm asking for your vote so that we can keep making progress, keep moving forward, and continue changing Maryland for the better.
Gentlemen, thank you. Let's introduce the four reporters who will be asking the questions tonight. From the Washington Post, joining us is Ovita Wiggins, Pamela Wood from the Baltimore Sun, from the Hagerstown Herald Mail, Tamala Baker, and from WMDT Salisbury, Ryan Eldridge. I'd like to thank those four organizations for participating. Also, our other partners, including WBAL Baltimore, WJLA Washington, WYPR Radio, and the League of Women Voters. Here's how the questions will work. Each candidate will get to respond to each question. We'll alternate the order. The answers will be 60 seconds. We'll have time for 60-second rebuttals as well. I should note that while this debate began in an unusual manner, it was negotiated directly between the campaigns in a bilateral agreement. Now that we're on the air, this is a production of Maryland Public Television, and the reporters and I are under no restrictions whatsoever in terms of the questions that can be asked. Let's go first to Ovida from the Post.
Governor Hogan, although the economy has rebounded and wage growth remains stagnant in Maryland, many people across the state have not seen their paychecks grow. What specific policies would you enact to grow the private sector and to raise wages?
Well, first of all, wages are up in Maryland all across the board, up 9%. So you're not right on the facts there, Ovida. But look, I have my entire focus of my governorship has been to grow the economy, to put more people to work, and to turn our economy around. Wages have grown at every level. More people are working. My first year as governor, we got more people hired than any other time in the past 15 years. We've continued to have more people working at higher salaries, and we're going to continue. The only way to do it is to continue to grow our economy, continue to get small businesses and big businesses to grow and hire more people. And we're very proud of the record we've got. We've had one of the best economic turnarounds in America.
Mr. Jealous.
Yeah, actually, I think that Ms. Wiggins is right on her facts, Governor.
No, I don't think so.
We have the lowest job growth, the lowest income growth in the region.
That's not true.
If we had the job growth of Virginia, sir, if we had the job growth of Virginia, we'd have 40,000 more jobs right now. Here's the punchline, sir. Virginia's job growth is lower than the national average. Studies have shown there's 49 states with a positive outlook on the economy for in this country in the next year. We're not one of them. As a small business person in this state, I've put together a plan to make sure that we put our government on the side of small business people, that we back the state's entrepreneurs. We take the Office of Tech Transfer out of the Department of Commerce. We put it in the governor's office because, unlike you, sir, who didn't return Discovery's call for 4 months, I'll be actively involved in building a more inclusive, robust economy every day.
Mr. Hogan,
let me just say
time.
That sounded really good, but not a single word that you said was true. So we went from losing 100,000 jobs to gaining 100,000 jobs. We had some of the fastest job growth in America. We went from last place in the Mid-Atlantic region to first place. Just last month, we added another 8,000 jobs and brought our unemployment rate down again to 4.2. When you keep talking about these things, I don't know where you get these talking points from, but they're absolutely false. Look, I'm a lifelong small businessman. Spent my entire life in Maryland running a small business. It's the reason I ran for governor, because I was so frustrated with what was happening. The state that I loved, that I spent my entire life here, was way off track. We have grown. We have more businesses open in Maryland than ever before in history. Small businesses are growing like crazy. We're number one in America in startups. We created more jobs in the first year than they had done. For 15 years, they hadn't met that mark. So I don't know where you get these stats, how you play with the numbers, but my 4-year record is clear. We've led the nation. We've increased jobs, increased wages, and you just can't keep making up these stories.
60 seconds, Mr. Jealous.
Sure. Governor, please, you can go to benjealous.com. All the reports are there.
Not going to go to Ben
All
Jealous.
the facts are there. And also, all of my plans are there. When I actually tell the people, say, I will do something, I put a plan there. It's transparent, the pay for it. My staff doesn't have to walk things back. Like you say, oh, we'll give so-and-so a tax cut, but we don't know how we're going to pay for it. And then your staff says, well, it's aspirational. Governor, the people of the state deserve to have a plan to move forward. You don't have any plans.
We've moved forward at one of the fastest rates in America. Your only plan is to double the state budget and increase taxes by 100%, and you're not honest enough to tell people each taxpayer in Maryland is going to have their taxes go up 12%. Under the O'Malley administration, they raised taxes on the average taxpayer $4,800. It nearly crushed our economy. It cost us 8,000 businesses and 100,000 jobs. I can't imagine what would happen under a plan like yours.
Last word
but it's
on
not
this,
going to be
Mr.
friendly
Jealous.
to businesses.
Yeah, sure. You know what convinced me to advocate to bring Medicare for All to our state? I tried to move a factory here to South Baltimore from northern Canada. And the deal fell apart because the cost of health care in our health exchange has kept surging under Governor Hogan, up 120% in 4 years. That company ended up moving to Toronto because they could not come into this country because the health care costs keep surging. That would have created 300 new jobs in South Baltimore where we need them. So, but you have no plan. You just put in a one-year fix. We can't run businesses not knowing what's going to happen to our healthcare costs year to year. You're choking small businesses because you won't lead on healthcare, because you won't stand up to the pharmaceutical companies. I put a plan out there to bring our pharmaceutical costs down. You could have put it in place 4 years ago, sir.
Well, I'm going to move on here just because we'll be back to healthcare, I'm sure, and I want to get all the reporters on the air. Pam Wood from The Sun, this question goes first to Mr. Jealous.
On June 28th, 5 of my colleagues were murdered at the Capitol newspaper in Annapolis by a man who had a legally owned gun. And on Thursday, a person with a legal gun opened fire at a Rite Aid warehouse in Aberdeen, killing 3 coworkers. Wendy, Rebecca, Rob, Gerald, John, Sunday, Brindra, and Haleen are far from the only Marylanders to be killed by legally owned guns. What can you do to prevent these kinds of killings in the future?
My heart goes out to you, and you and your colleagues are heroes. I know what it's like to work in a newsroom that's been attacked. The Jackson Advocate newspaper, where I was an editor when I was young, was attacked before and after my tenure there. I know how we were on pins and needles all the time. We have to act with courage, and my heart goes out to the Rite Aid workers and the students at Great Mills, who as soon as they asked me to meet with them, I met with them. And I'm oddly proud to receive an F rating from the NRA because of my lifetime of standing up to them, and I'll continue to do that as governor. We need to make sure that we stem the flow of illegal guns into our state. We need to close the AR-15 loophole, but we also need to make sure that we treat this as the public health crisis that it is. There's a public mental health crisis, and we have to make sure that people get the mental health care that they need. Medicare for all also means mental health care for all. And in our schools, we don't need more guns. We need more social workers and psychologists to work with young people who are experiencing a mental health crisis as well. Thank you for your courage.
Well, my heart was broken that day. This is our hometown newspaper in Annapolis. I was on the scene within 5 minutes as they were still taking people from the building. And I was thanking our police officers who responded so quickly and so bravely. And there's tremendous cooperation and coordination between the city of Annapolis, Anne Arundel County Police, the state police, and the sheriff's department. More lives could have been lost had it not been for the quick response. But yes, this is a tragedy that we have to continue to do everything we can about. I also was down in Great Mills immediately after the shooting there. Well, I've long been a strong supporter of tougher laws to keep guns out of the hands of the mentally ill and people with a criminal background. We have made it even tougher with legislation that's going to take place next week, 7 days from today. We sponsored red flag laws to make sure that we can have more of an ability to take away guns from people that are mentally ill. I also passed tough mandatory sentences on people that commit crimes with a gun. It's tragic, and there's no easy answer. We have the toughest gun laws in America, but I've moved to make them even tougher and to try to make sure that we cover some of these loopholes. Now, would it have stopped this tragedy at the Annapolis Capitol? I'm not sure, but it certainly would give us better, stronger ability to keep the guns away from somebody like this in the future. And this is a tragedy that we're going to have to keep focused on. I put $200 million into school safety to add more school resource officers and mental health counselors to try to find and address these problems before it's too late.
Mr. Hogan, your time is up. Let's go next to Tammy Baker of the Herald Mail.
The Division of Corrections spends millions every month because of a lingering shortage of staff at state prisons. Correctional officers are forced to work long hours, and there are safety concerns as well. The state has taken steps to try to recruit more officers, but the union that represents them says it's not enough. How far are you willing to go to fill those positions?
Well, you're absolutely right. We do have a staffing shortage, and the entire state has been working hard to fix that. But let's go back to the root of the problem. Under the previous administration, gangs and criminals were running the entire state prison system. We said we were going to come in and clean up the entire operation. It resulted in 139 indictments of correctional officers, other people working in the correctional facilities, and the people they were coordinating with in the private sector. We decided that we needed to make sure we had background checks and lie detectors and make sure that we weren't hiring more criminals into the system, and that's what we've done. It's made it more difficult to fill these positions. We need to pay these positions better. What we've done to help recruit, we put signing bonuses. We gave them, we'll pay for take care of their student debt up to $20,000. We've been having a major marketing campaign to address them. We've been hiring more people. But under my opponent's plan, His plan, it's the only place he wants to cut. He wants to fire thousands of correctional officers, public safety officers, and put thousands of dangerous criminals out on the streets.
Sure.
First of all, Governor, it's not the only place that I want to cut. I've put a bigger tax cut on the table than you ever have actually put a proposal forward on, and that's to cut our sales tax. And I've put a plan on the table based on my work, working with bipartisan leaders across the state to shrink prison systems in a way that's smart and safe, gets more killers off the street, stops our bloated spending on our criminal justice systems. I simply want to bring our incarceration rate in line with states like New Jersey, where violent crime is down as opposed to it being up here on your watch, sir. We can be safer, we can be smarter, but when we do that, we have to do it with working with the officers. When I rolled out the criminal justice strategy for the NAACP, I had every civil rights leader you might expect. I also had noted Republican leaders and the president of the largest corrections officers union in the country standing right next to me. We all want to be safer. We all want to make sure we're spending more and more in public higher education and not mass incarceration. Even the officers who want their kids to have a better deal when they go to our state's public universities. And that's what's at the heart of my plan, is shrinking our prison system in a way that makes it safer, saving money and sending those monies to our public colleges and universities so that we also end the massive student debt crisis.
Mr. Jealous might not be aware of what's been happening here in Maryland, but we actually passed the most intensive criminal justice reform act in a generation and have been praised by almost every single elected Democrat in Maryland. We've reduced our prison population more than the other 49 states. We're #1 in America in reducing the prison population. We've reduced it by 9%. We've gotten rid of all the people that were simple possession, misdemeanors, and other things. He now wants to take another 30% of the violent criminals. These are murderers and rapists and repeat violent offenders, and put them back onto the streets. It just is absolutely not. Some of your proposals are reckless, but this one is downright dangerous, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And if we were to fire thousands of public safety officers and put thousands of violent criminals on the streets, that's going to help you lower the crime situation. I just don't think that makes sense.
Governor, from Willie Horton to Donald Trump, your party plays by the same playbook. We see it on the hateful ads that you've been running now for months. You try to scare people, sir, because you don't have a plan. And when you don't have a plan...
Wait. I just said our plan was recognized as the best in America.
Yeah.
We've already accomplished it.
That was the Democrats' plan that was passed that you had to sign because there was a supermajority.
No, that's not true. We actually introduced it and worked very hard to get everybody on board.
As has happened so many times, sir. Yeah. I mean, earlier you were talking about guns, and you seem to forgot the fact that you mocked the idea of bump stock
That's not
bills,
true.
And then you said, "Oh no, you laughed about it."
I said it immediately the day after the shooting in Las Vegas. You're just making that up.
No. So we can go back and play the tape on that one. But on this issue, sir, I really take umbrage. I've had 2 family members shot in Maryland in the last 10 years. One in Howard County, one in Prince George's County. And on your watch, murders are up in our state 42%. As of today, revised down 34% in the 23 counties outside of Baltimore City, and more than 50% when you do include Baltimore City. I've worked with Governor Deal, I've worked with Governor Schwarzenegger, I've worked with the mayor of New York City as president of the NAACP to put through strategies that make us safer, that make our prison system small, and for you to suggest that I would allow violent criminals out early is straight out of the old playbook. It's from Willie Horton to Donald Trump.
Yeah, but that's just nonsense. Look, it's right on your website. You want to reduce the prison population by 30%. We've already reduced it at a higher rate than any other state in the country. You want to cut the major cut is the only cut in spending. You want to cut $660 million out of public safety. That would fire 2,000 or 3,000 public safety officers.
Sir.
That's not going to help violent crime. Now let's talk about the situation of violent crime and how that plan would help and how what we've been doing might help. Baltimore City, first of all, we had the worst violence breakout in 47 years, 89 days after I was governor. I brought in the National Guard, 4,000 members of the Guard, 1,000 police officers, and I've been there ever since, trying to back up the city. We sent in 500 state and federal law enforcement officers into the city a couple of months ago, served 14,000 warrants, arrested 500 people, and took 260 of the most violent repeat offenders off the streets. We then passed a comprehensive crime bill through the legislature, which they supported our plan that while we've already lowered sentences for smaller offenses, on these repeat violent offenders and the people that are shooting people on the streets of Baltimore and elsewhere, they need to do time. And now they will, starting in October, 1 week from today.
Last word on this, Mr. Jealous.
Absolutely. Sir, from Willie Horton to Donald Trump, your party.
I don't have anything to do with Willie Horton or Donald Trump.
Please let me speak, Governor. I've given you a lot of respect. I would simply ask for the same, sir. From Willie Horton to Donald Trump, your party plays by the same playbook. You lie and you scare people. I have not said anywhere that I would do what you are suggesting. What I have said is I would do what I worked with, frankly, governors who have more courage than you, Republican governors who have more courage than you, to help bring their prison systems in line with states like New Jersey, where violent crime has been falling.
Number one in America. It doesn't matter how many times you say it, it's not going to be true.
Please stop
Willie
cutting me off,
Horton
sir.
and Donald Trump don't have much to do with this.
Please stop. No, sir, that is the playbook that you're playing by.
I'm not
Folks
playing by
have been subjected to 2 months of your ads trying to scare them. They need to hear the truth.
Ads they're not my ads, but I think they're completely factual. It's on your website.
When it's my time, do I get to speak or
well,
you're
let's finish this up and then move
so
on.
I'm responding.
All right. Next question, Ryan Eldridge. This will go first to Mr. Jealous.
Mr. Jealous, the question is, the opioid epidemic puts a strain on law enforcement, medical personnel, and our labor force, in addition to other things. We can't deny we need a fix. We need fixes. I want to know where the state can get the money to pay for treatment options or facilities that are sorely needed in places like the Eastern Shore and across Maryland.
And let's play the tape on this. My opponent ran for office saying that this was an emergency. In December of 2014, he said on his first day of office he would declare a state of emergency. He then didn't do it for 2 years, while thousands of our neighbors died. Deaths from opioids under his watch are up 160%. The leaders of our state had a plan to fund crisis response centers, 10 of them across the state. He only funded one. It was in Baltimore, and that one's been underfunded, where they're rationing the life-saving drug naloxone, and people are dying because the doctors say we just don't have enough for the city. He now says that he's gotten some money from the federal government. That's great. But what should we have done in the meantime? This is why we have a rainy day fund. If this was a natural disaster, we would have used it right away. Then you go and you sue the pharmaceutical companies, and you win back the funds. You hold them responsible. They're not funding my campaign like they're funding his campaign. I have no problem taking on these companies, suing them, and making them pay for the pain and the havoc that they have wreaked in our state.
Well, look, when I was running for governor 4 years ago, as I traveled around the state, I went to every single community, and everywhere I went, I said, what's the #1 problem facing your community? And they said, heroin and opioids. It surprised me, quite frankly. We promised, when I was elected, I promised that we were going to focus on this problem because it had not been focused on before. People were sweeping it under the rug. Immediately after becoming governor, I appointed Lieutenant Governor Boyd Rutherford to chair the Heroin and Opioid Emergency Task Force, which went around the state and got input from people all across the state. We then implemented all the 36 recommendations of that, passed things through the legislature, did the things that we could do through executive order. I became the first governor in America to declare a state of emergency on this crisis because we were losing more people than shooting and traffic fatalities added together. So I promised to do something about it. First one to turn it into a state of emergency. We invested $600 million in state money. We've gone after it from every direction, from prevention to treatment to interdiction and to stopping the crime and the dealing of these drugs. Now, it's a terrible crisis. We're one of the only states to have bent the curve downward on prescription drug opioids, on prescription opioids, on heroin. But we have this new synthetic fentanyl and carfentanil that's 50 times stronger and more deadly. We're now fighting that one as well. But for you to try to use the deaths of these people, these 2,000 Marylanders that died, this is tearing apart families and communities from one end of the country to the other. I never go talk in Washington because I don't think they ever get anything done, but they asked me to come down to speak before a Senate committee because I'm a nationally recognized expert on this subject. I went down and testified. The Senate has now passed a bill. We desperately need federal funding to assist, but it's going to take the state, the feds, and local governments all working together.
Man, I have a cousin who's in rehab for heroin right now.
I didn't hear what you said.
I said, I have a cousin who's in rehab for heroin right now. All right? This isn't about, this is about real lives, sir. This is about real families, sir.
Yeah, I know it is.
I've sat with 13-year-old girls in Talbot County who buried 3 classmates. in the 12 months before. I've sat with pastors in Baltimore City who fear that their high school reunion will have to be at the cemetery because they buried so many classmates. And for you to sit here, sir, and suggest this is about politics, this is about lives. And to say that you did a study when the Democrats gave you a plan and you refused to champion it. We needed those 10 crisis response centers all across our state this entire time, sir, and you have not led. I get that you're an expert, but we needed you to use that expertise on day one. And you waited until something like day 730 to declare a state of emergency while our neighbors died. And that is not leadership. It is not acceptable. And don't tell me this is politics. This is about people and lives.
Okay, we were the first state in America to declare a state of emergency. I know it's about lives. I'm the one that brought this issue to the forefront. We're now nationally recognized as the leader in America on this subject. Yes, people are still dying, and it's tragic. And I lost my first cousin to a heroin overdose myself. But to get up here and talk about I'm responsible for the deaths of these people. Imagine had we not spent this. Imagine if
you waited 2 years. You said day one.
I was the first one in America. We started at 3 weeks after I started.
You said day one, and it was 2 years.
Okay, it's not true. We've done a lot.
It is
true. It's a tragedy. We've made great progress on certain aspects of it.
December 2014, when you would take office in January 2015,
in February,
you said on
I started the heroin and
that you would declare a state of emergency, and you never did. So you took 2 years.
You're just
you studied it while Democrats had a plan. You should have backed up the Democrats.
That's not true. And let me address the other made-up story about the 10 centers. We've doubled the number of treatment beds. And we've spent more money. The center in Baltimore City, we increased from $2 million to $5 million. We've made naloxone available everywhere across the state. And it was the state legislature, your friends, the Democrats in the legislature, that took the wording out for those 10 centers. Not me. I had nothing to do with that. I thought it was a mistake.
You said
No.
The governor controls the budget.
No,
so
no, that's not true.
We all know that.
We make suggestions, and then the legislature moves the money around.
They took the centers
out.
Next question, Pam Wood goes first to Mr. Hogan.
The Baltimore region lacks a comprehensive mass transit system, and many people believe this holds back the city and its residents from economic opportunities. Please describe what your vision is of the importance of mass transit, and Governor Hogan specifically, can you please explain your decision to cancel the Red Line project?
Sure. I have invested more in transit than any other governor in the history of the state. We just put up a proposal that we finally got Virginia and D.C. on board to save Metro. We're moving forward on the $5.6 billion Purple Line project. My plan is balanced. We have $15 billion in transportation improvements. We put $3 billion into Baltimore City. We revamped the entire transit system in the city, where we just were recognized and won a national award as the best revamp of a transit system. But the Red Line is something that I know your newspaper and others have criticized us for. It's something that the Washington Post editorial board said it never made any economic or transportation sense whatsoever, which is why Governor O'Malley didn't do it for 8 years. But we've done everything possible moving forward on the top priority projects in every single jurisdiction across the state. We put more money into transit, more money into roads, because traffic congestion and getting people from where they live to where they work is critically important, and we're going to continue to do so.
Sure.
If you take Larry Hogan's approach to transit, you turn it on its head, you get pretty close to mine. He wants us to have big, fancy, privatized lanes for rich people that you can pay $45 at peak times to try to get on there like they do down in Virginia. What he doesn't want to do is invest more in MARC, invest more in Metro, make it run more often and longer and extend the lines out. And for the Baltimore region, he killed the Red Line. We had $900 million worked for 10 years of people of the city, people of the region, to get that going, and you took it away, sir. And you hamstrung us in the city, in the county. I was with people in the chamber in Anne Arundel County, and they are upset over it. You get on the bus in Baltimore City, I don't know the last time you were there, and you ask folks and you say, 5 years ago, how many buses did you take? 1. How many do you take now? 2. How many did you take then? 2. How many do you take now? 4. And their time with their children gets eaten up because it's doubled their time. I was with an 8-year-old boy in the McCullough Homes housing project where my mom grew up. And I said, what do you want the next governor to know? And after he told me he'd seen too many dead men, he said, fix the bus system because this one broke it. My mom and I used to have to walk 2 blocks to the bus station. Now we have to walk 6. And then somebody chimed in and said, and the only people who have profited are the criminals who prey on us in the next 4 blocks. A reminder that public transportation is often a prerequisite to good public safety.
Again, we put $3 billion into transportation in Baltimore City. We've revamped the entire bus system. It's working much better for most people, and the Red Line never made any sense to almost anyone. And most people in the state were totally opposed to it.
I would invite you to ride the bus in Baltimore City with me.
I was there when we opened the entire system.
No, but I mean, just casually walk through and ask people. It's really quite amazing. And you say this about education, you say about transportation. Sir, if we have record funding, why don't we have record results?
We do have record funding, but we'll get into that in the next question.
Next question from Ovita Wiggins goes first to Mr. Jealous.
Mr. Jealous, both you and the governor have said one way or another that where a child lives should not determine their destiny. Despite that, Maryland has one of the sharpest achievement gaps in the country. MSDE statistics show that 45% of students who don't receive free and reduced meals are proficient, for example, in Algebra 1. Meanwhile, only 13% of students who come from poor families are proficient in the subject. What 3 concrete actions would you take to close the achievement gap? And please be specific.
Absolutely. And thank you for that question. Over the last 4 years, our schools have fallen in the national rankings. Every year Governor Hogan's been in office, they've fallen from 1st to 6th. And what has he done? He's toured the state with Betsy DeVos and sent millions of dollars to private schools in the form of vouchers while cutting funds for our schools, almost $100 million. And now we're seeing the fruit of that. The majority of children in our state are not proficient in reading or writing or math. The best way to close that achievement gap is to make sure that there's a high quality teacher in every classroom. And that's why I have proposed for us to increase teacher pay 29% over 7 years so we can recruit and retain the best teachers in the country. We also have to make sure that every child shows up to kindergarten ready to learn. And that's why we need to have universal full-day pre-K. I proposed that and to pay for it by legalizing cannabis for adult use. And finally, we have to make sure that every child comes out of our schools ready for a career, not just for college. It will also keep more in as they can see how school adds up. And when I'm governor, we will make sure that we put more vocational education into our high schools, giving every child a path to a rewarding job, not just to college, because we know many of them decide that they won't ever get there and they drop out earlier.
Well, I believe very strongly that every single child in our state deserves access to a world-class education, regardless of what neighborhood they happen to grow up in. And that's what we've been focused on for 4 years. Why we put $25 billion into K through 12 education. No governor in the history of the state has ever invested more. We went over and above the legislatively mandated formulas and put more money in spite of declining school populations because we think we need to reinvest in our kids. I've also proposed a lockbox to make sure that all the casino revenues go directly, $4.4 billion more goes into the schools. Mr. Jealous wants to take 100% of that casino lockbox money and use it to, he says he's going to give teachers a 29% raise. That would eat the whole $4.4 billion up. I think we do need to pay our teachers better. But $4.4 billion, he has nothing to do with teacher salaries. The governor, they don't work for the governor. These are local employees that work for the local school systems, and he has no ability to deliver on this promise whatsoever. But we're going to continue to fund education. We're going to continue to try to make improvements. I have record funding in school construction. We just opened 5 schools in Baltimore City just within the past 2 weeks. We built 28 schools there. 124 schools across the state. We're trying to get our teachers better. We've lowered class sizes 4 years in a row. I know some people in some places, we've got to still work on it, but the average is down to 20 students, 20.46 students per classroom. And let me go back to this often repeated phony story at the Baltimore Sun. It totally says is false. Martin O'Malley, the previous governor, cheated on the test scores. It's already been investigated. He didn't include special needs kids or kids for kids that had English as a second language. And as a result, he inflated the numbers, much like Prince George's County just did by cheating 5,000 kids and giving them higher grades than they should have gotten. When I talked about this all during the last campaign. We're not telling people the truth. When I first became governor, we adjusted the real numbers down to 6. We didn't bring the schools down from number 1 to number 6. They never were number 1. We were just the first ones to be honest about it.
Sir,
but we are 6th in the nation. Number 1 in the nation in Howard County, number 3 in Montgomery County, and we're going to fight until we get every school system up to par.
You know, the governor went 2 minutes and 45 seconds and never told us what his plan was because he doesn't have one. Governor, if we have record funding, why don't we have record results? If we have record funding, school construction, why were the kids freezing last winter? Why were they broiling this this fall. Why do I, as a public school parent, have to carry in jugs of clean drinking water, be afraid of my child drinking out of the water fountain? Why are kids crammed into trailers? Now they call them learning cottages, but they're still just trailers. We can do much better by the school children of our state. But it means, sir, that you've got to be willing to lead, that you've got to be willing to put a plan out there. I've put my plan out there. It's on my website. I've explained how we will give the teachers raises. You should look into it. Happy to help you on that one. They need them now, not just when I'm governor. But, sir, let us be really, really clear here. Our kids suffer when our leaders don't lead. You keep sending money to private schools in the form of vouchers and touring around with Betsy DeVos, and you don't put a plan on the table. She asked you for a specific plan. Please tell us what your plan is.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. There's a number of things I'd like to address in that. Let's talk about Betsy DeVos first. Betsy DeVos is the Secretary of Education. She came out to a school in Montgomery County to read books to kids. I sat there in a first grade class and read books to kids. I've been with the last 3 education secretaries, 2 of them under President Obama, 1 under President Trump. We weren't going to just tell her she can't come into our state to read with kids. That's about as far as the connection goes. The voucher, Betsy DeVos, Trump voucher program wasn't my idea. It was Mike Bush's idea. He worked it out with the teachers union. It was passed almost unanimously by Democratic legislators. I had a proposal that would give tax incentives for any donation, an individual or company that donates to a public or private school. The legislature shot that down. They switched it to scholarship programs for needy kids. I went along and signed the bill, but it wasn't my bill, and it's not the Hogan-DeVos voucher program. It's the Mike Bush-DeVos program.
All right, so now it's been 3.5 minutes, and you asked for very specific answers how to close the achievement gap for kids who are in schools with free and reduced lunch from Western Maryland to the Eastern Shore. What's your plan, sir?
So I don't know if you know how the education system works in Maryland. I know you just recently moved here from California. It may be different there. But
sir,
here,
I ran the NAACP.
But here,
starting 10 years ago, you never came to meet with me. I run the only Baltimore office of a Silicon Valley-based firm. You think you might reach out, sir? Other governors did, and I would have been happy to help you. But when if you're not familiar, the nation's largest civil rights organization, the NAACP, is headquartered in our state.
I know. I think you tried to move it to New York, but let's get back on track.
You get the last word on this, and then we'll move on.
I lost track of even what the heck we were talking about now.
Your plan, sir.
Oh, so look, why isn't it?
And you keep taking credit for the teacher's plan.
Here's the plan.
It's their lockbox because you've rated it like my 6-year-old rates a cookie jar for 4 years in a row. That's why the teachers pushed it forward.
No, the legislature makes the final decisions on that.
And then you try to steal their emblem and pretend like they had endorsed you because they endorse me because I meet with all of them.
Okay, well,
you won't even
nearly every other union in the state has endorsed me, and thousands of teachers are supporting me as well. But let me talk about it. So the local school systems make all those decisions about us, how to spend money, how to pay teachers, what to do with the funds. We provided the record funding, and Peter Francho and I, the comptroller, have been pushing these local school systems for 4 years to take care of some of these issues and some of these problems, but they're completely unaccountable. So I have a plan. We're now the second least accountable school system in America because of actions by the legislature, not by me. We're trying to I want to be #1 in accountability. We want to get these local school systems. We want to pay the teachers better. It's outrageous and disgraceful that after we gave them $60 million in Baltimore City that they weren't able to fix the air conditioners and the heat. But that's not the role of the governor. It's the local school board. All we can do is pressure them.
Gentlemen, we need to move on. Ryan Eldridge has the next question.
It's my understanding that a Beacon Quarterly Trends study suggests the Eastern Shore has yet to fully recover from the most recent recession. Now, that was about a decade ago. It's alarming when you take a look at the numbers. Somerset County still has an unemployment rate at 7.2%, and others in the area are still well over 5%. Pair that with the labor participation rate, which is also low in the area, according to this study, and you have a recipe for disaster if we have another downturn. How are we preparing ourselves for another downturn in these areas, and how are we working to lift these counties, specifically Somerset County, out of poverty?
Mr. Hogan first.
Thank you, Ryan. We, as I said earlier, we've turned our economy around, and unemployment is down statewide, down to 4.2%. But I've said we're not going to rest until every single county has gotten to that point. We are down in Somerset County. I mean, it's down from 10 to 7, 10.9 down to 7. Every single one of our 24 jurisdictions has more jobs, less unemployment. And our labor participation rate is the best in the region and one of the best in the country. But you're right, that's why I passed the More Jobs for Marylanders Act, and I got the legislature, the Democrats in the legislature get on board with me, because there were certain areas, Baltimore City, the Lower Shore, Western Maryland, and Prince George's County, that weren't seeing the tremendous gains in jobs that the rest of the state was. And so we passed the More Jobs for Marylanders Act, which will incentivize businesses to go into those areas where we need jobs the most. And we'll waive state taxes for 10 years for those businesses to encourage them to come in. We've got now, I think, 2,000 jobs, hundreds of different companies that are taking advantage of this, and that we just passed the More Jobs for Marylanders Act 2 in this past legislative session, which hasn't even taken effect yet. But I've spent, as you know, tons of time on the Eastern Shore. I promised when I was running for governor that I was going to not ignore any part of the state, and I've been to every single county on the shore multiple times, and we're doing everything we can. We're bringing high-speed internet down to Somerset County, and we're working with their economic development folks.
Sir,
we're going to make sure they all get more jobs.
Mr. Jealous.
The governor's had 4 years, and we're dead last in the region in job growth, and we're dead last in income growth. And there's 49 states with a positive outlook for their economy, and we are not one of them. And part of what's dragging down the Eastern Shore is the fact that our state on whole under his leadership is held back. On the Eastern Shore, we need to make sure that every kid who wants to go to a community college can go for free, and every worker who wants to retrain can retrain. The governor's worked with Democrats to make for some. We need to do it for everybody. We need to make sure that young people, when they find a job, can get to the job. Bring on-demand technology into public transportation so that vans can go point to point, right? Because buses going in straight lines won't work in most areas. We have to make sure that workers are also paid a fair wage for a fair day's work. We've got to raise the minimum wage. Oftentimes in coastal communities, quite frankly, rents are high because you have to compete with tourists. And we know that in our state, we're the most expensive state to try to rent a one-bedroom apartment on a minimum wage job. Will take 101% of your income. And we also have to stand up to Donald Trump, as Governor Hogan failed to do every time he tries to assault Obamacare. Because in many of those counties, the healthcare industry is a major employer. And if it implodes further, as it would have done this fall, if we didn't put a temporary fix, and it would definitely do if Trump is successful in what your party's trying to do to our healthcare system.
Mr. Jealous, time is up.
It would devastate folks in rural areas.
We can go back and forth. I just want to say we have about 10 minutes left in the Q&A.
Well, I'd like
so I'm going to get a little bit more serious
I mean,
about enforcing the clock.
He just had a whole string of things, none of which were true, but we talk about 49,000. We've had one of the greatest economic turnarounds in America. We're leading the region. Our unemployment is down, employment is up, there's more businesses, more jobs. We already passed the Promise Act to allow people that were in need to attend community college for free. I'm proposing expanding that to 4 years. As far as job training and workforce development, we're again a national leader. We just reached the point of 10,000 apprenticeships. We're putting more money, more funding, more effort into trying to teach people the skills that are needed, because we could hire another 80,000 people if we get them trained and up to speed. And with respect to Trump and Obamacare, look, I came out against the House plan, the Trump plan, and the Senate plan. I've been standing up because Washington has failed. Both parties have failed, the Democrats and the Republicans. So we took it upon ourselves to try to address that directly right here in our state. Just a week ago, we stopped 91% rate increases, and we're going to have, for the first time in 20 years, our largest insurance carriers lowering rates. And for the first time since Obamacare passed 10 years ago, every single insurance rate is going down in our state.
Sir, time. Mr. Jealous, last word on this.
Yeah, might go down next year after going up 4 years in a row.
It's gone up 10 years in a row.
Surging 120%. You taking credit for our economy being slightly better years after the end of the recession, in some places, not all, is like taking credit for the sun rising, sir. Let's run on your record, not on mythology. We have the lowest job growth in the region. We have the lowest income growth in the region. If we had the growth of Virginia, we would have 40,000 more jobs right now. 40,000 more jobs right now. Their growth is below the national average. If we had the income growth of Virginia, the average worker right now would have $8,000 more in their pocket. If we had the income growth of Delaware, the average worker right now would have $15,000 more in their pocket over your time in office. Sir.
I think you must be thinking about your home state of California.
Gentlemen, we need to move on here. Next question.
We're number one in wage growth.
No, we're going to enforce time now. Gentlemen, Tammy Baker, Governor, Tammy Baker has the next question.
It's just like you're living in a dream world.
Tammy, go ahead.
I'm going to draw back, if I could, to those parts of Maryland outside the population centers that Ryan just alluded to. These counties have some of the state's highest unemployment rates. They have a higher percentage of children in their public school systems who do qualify for free and reduced meals. They've historically had fewer opportunities for economic development, and sadly, they seem to be posting some of the higher overdose numbers. They also have fewer resources for dealing with all of those things. Over the next 4 years, what will your commitment be to those Marylanders who live outside the Baltimore-Washington metropolitan area? And please be specific if you could.
We'll make sure that all their kids can go to a good school and get a great education by finally fully funding our schools, stopping the $2 billion of underfunding, budgeting our schools first, keeping the broken promise on the casino money. We'll make sure that all of them have health care, that nobody has to line up for free dental care at an amphitheater at 6 o'clock in the morning by passing Medicare for all. We will make sure that we grow in all regions of the state by bringing universal broadband. We will make sure that we hold on to the jobs that are there as far as the health economy by defending Obamacare from the Republican attacks again and again and again going further. And we will make sure that we bring big data into ag hubs and build 21st century ag hubs that help our farmers get ahead of the ravages of climate change so that they can anticipate what crops, what livestock will flourish better as our climates change. And we will make sure that we solve the public transportation conundrum by bringing on-demand technology into vans to move them point to point, just as we do on the Eastern Shore. We need to be doing it in Western Maryland as well.
Sir, your time is up.
If I may.
We'll be back to it. Mr. Hogan.
Well, 4 years ago, when I was running for governor, we visited every single corner of the state, and I've done it ever since I became governor. I've been to all 24 jurisdictions. And I can tell you that the people in Western Maryland and the people on the shore who we were just talking about really felt for 8 years that they were being completely ignored and neglected and forgotten. And I promised that we were going to just turn that around completely, that no longer were those areas of the state going to be left out. That's why I've focused almost as much time there as I have anywhere else in the state. I've been to Western Maryland more times than any governor in the history of the state. I've been there more than the governor that was from Western Maryland. We brought in more transportation money, more education money, more community development money. We've got projects for the redevelopment of Hagerstown, Cumberland, Frostburg. I just opened a new school in Allegheny. Allegheny High was the oldest school in the entire state, 93 years old. We've got a beautiful brand new school. But there's no question that they have issues and problems that are facing them that other areas of the state do not have. I'm very familiar with it. We're going to keep working and continue to invest in Western Maryland and the Eastern Shore as well.
You want to continue?
Yeah. I just want to go back to something earlier. The governor's lying again, saying I just moved here from California. Sir, let's just talk for a second, all right? I was named Person of the Year by the Baltimore Sun 5 years ago because of my leadership in civil rights in our state. My dad was one of the few white guys to go to jail repeatedly for desegregating lunch counters in downtown Baltimore. My mom sued Western High School for Girls when she was 12, so she could desegregate when she was 15. My grandma is a proud 101-year-old retired Maryland social worker who helped train Barbara Mikulski. My granddad came here to work the B&O Railroad and went on to be a probation officer. And there are POs, ones who have endorsed me, who I'm fighting for, that he helped train who are still on the job today. If you're wondering why I didn't grow up here, sir, it's because my parents' marriage was against the law in 1966. They fell in love with school teachers at Harlem Park Junior High, and they had to leave. I was sent back here every summer because this is home. And I've come back here every chance I got because this is home. I'm fighting for the promise of our state, which my family has fought for since at least 1941. I'm proud of our history in the state. I'm proud of my history in the state. And I won't let you or anybody else lie about who I am or where I'm from.
Well, first of all, Mr. Jealous, I have tremendous respect for your life story and what your parents had to go through. And I wasn't trying to in any way disparage them or what you went through growing up. It's just a simple fact that you registered here for the first time to vote in 2012, and that the first time you ever voted in a gubernatorial Democratic primary was for yourself. You were living in California. Even when you were the president of the NAACP in Baltimore City, you tried to move it to New York, and you lived in D.C. Yeah. So, I mean, it's the fact that you haven't been here, I know you've spent a lot of time. I admire your service at the NAACP. I respect you for that. But you just don't know the Maryland issues because you haven't spent enough time here. And by the way, I was the Marylander of the Year by the Baltimore Sun 4 years ago. But
gentlemen,
so we have something in common.
We have time for one more question from Ovita Wiggins.
This is a very concise question. You have a minute in the Oval Office with President Trump. What do you tell him?
Well, I would tell him that he's his own worst enemy, and that he should stop tweeting, and that we don't need this kind of divisive rhetoric. And I would tell him that he needs to get his administration focused on the problems and the people out there that need help. I did not like this one thing that Mr. Jealous and I have in common. Neither one of us endorsed or supported or voted for Donald Trump. He likes to bring his name up a lot. But I've stood up time and time again. I led the fight when he tried to cut Bay funding. I would tell him that was a mistake. We got the Bay funding back in. I stood up to him on DACA. I stood up to him. I was the only governor in America to withdraw troops from the border when he was separating families. So there's not a whole lot of things that I have in common with the president. But if I had a chance to sit down with him, I would just, it's hard to put into 1 minute all the advice I would try to give him. It would take longer than that.
We have 1 minute for your answer on this, and then to closing statements.
Sure. You know, if I had 1 minute with him, I would say to him that I won't aid and abet him the way that our governor has. Our governor sent troops to the border to enforce his policies before he pulled them back. Our governor gave Betsy DeVos a tour of our state and then parroted her policies, sending millions of dollars to private schools in the form of vouchers while cutting funding to public schools as our students' performance has fallen. And our governor aids and abets Donald Trump on issues of how we treat immigrants in our state all the time. He wouldn't even stand up to the Muslim ban when a 4-year-old was caught in the middle of that. So I would tell Donald Trump that the days of the governor of Maryland aiding and abetting his strategy and everything from the Chesapeake Bay to immigration have ended. There's now a civil rights leader as governor, and I suspect that might make his blood pressure rise.
Gentlemen, we'll have 90 seconds for each of you to give closing statements. The order was determined randomly, and first to speak is Mr. Jealous.
Thank you. What do the people want, Barbara Jordan asked. They want an America as good as its promise. And what's the promise of Maryland? The promise of our state has always been that this place would be a place where it's a little easier for your children to achieve the American dream, and a little easier for you to not worry as you approach your golden years that your life will turn into a nightmare. Let's talk about the state, the promise of Maryland under 4 years of Mr. Hogan. Our schools have fallen from 1st to 6th in the national rankings. Healthcare costs have surged. He said we might get a little bit of a discount next year, but the last 4 years, up 120%, choking small businesses, driving families into poverty. Our job growth is so low that we're dead last in the region in job growth, dead last in income growth. If we had the growth of Virginia right now, we would have 40,000 more jobs, and their growth is below national average. And we are not safer. Murders are up 42% in the 23 counties, and when you factor in statewide, and when you factor in Baltimore City, up more than 50%. We can do much better. I have a plan to restore the promise of our state, to fully fund education and keep the broken promise on the casino money, make sure our teachers are respected and paid better, to pass Medicare for all, to build a more inclusive and robust economy like I do as a tech investor every day.
Sir, your time is up. Mr. Hogan has
minimum wage to $15 per hour and to end this season of mass
Mr. Jealous, your time is
by
up.
ending mass incarceration.
Mr.
I hope
Hogan.
that you will vote for me. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank our moderators and our sponsors tonight, and I want to thank all of you at home for watching. 4 years ago, I stood on the steps of our historic State House in Annapolis, and as I was giving my inaugural address, I said, let's not have the divisiveness that has affected our nation divide our state. I said that I wanted to try to bring people together, to bring in and usher in a new era of bipartisanship. I said I wanted to seek that middle ground where we could all stand together. I think people today are fed up with divisive rhetoric and extreme politics. I think we're actually setting an example for the nation about what can be accomplished when you put aside the party politics and the divisiveness. I think we're getting things done. Maryland is in a much, much better place than it was 4 years ago by any standard whatsoever. We're making a lot of progress, but there's still much more work to be done, which is why tonight I'm asking for your support so that we can continue to make progress, continue to move Maryland forward, and continue changing Maryland for the better. Thank you.
Early voting starts 1 month from tomorrow. This would be a good time to update your registration. And remember, you can see a replay of tonight's debate on the websites of our partners, not only MPT.org, but the Washington Post, the Baltimore Sun, the Herald, Mail, WMTT, YouTube, and pretty much everywhere else. Thanks to the panel. Thanks to the candidates. Thank you for watching. For all of us at Maryland Public Television, have a good night.